Welcome back. Important nonsense. Roster the people. 32 teams in 32 days. It's your summer edition. As you can see from directly behind me today. How about them Cowboys? Ugh, it made me feel sick just saying it. I threw up in my mouth a little bit. I barely got the delivery of that out. That was painful. What am I, Steve? Like, oh God.
God.
Yeah. It's completely. You know what? Should we start over? Should we just start over? We just cut that and we just. You know what? No, we're owning it. We're leaving all of this in, and we're powering through it. Welcome back. Another edition of 32 Teams in 32 Days, your fantasy football primer for the 2024 NFL season. As always, this is based on 12-team redraft, 16-round draft, PPR. All the rankings you hear are courtesy of Fantasy Pros. We will obviously mix in our own rankings as well. ADP is also courtesy of Fantasy Pros. We'd like to thank Fantasy Pros for allowing us to be part of their affiliate program. And Jason and I both do rankings for them on the side. Love you, Fantasy Pros. Don't know what we would do without you. With that being said, what do we do with this team? This team, when we agree, this team is at the crossroads, right? Like, this is it. If this doesn't work, everybody's fired, right? We blow it up. We're done.
Well, I mean, you have two
Right?
people that are wanting contracts, so and they're major pieces, like the pieces that you want for this team. So, woof.
Oh, speaking of which, today is the 25th of July. So if anything we say is a little bit dated, that would be why. Check out the wrap-up show, which will be right around November or September 1st. We will do a live stream and update all of our takes. The reason this is relevant is because training camp is just starting right now. But yeah, you have what? McCarthy is on the last year of his deal. Dak is on the last year of his deal. They brought Zeke back on a 1-year deal. We'll get into that. CeeDee Lamb is up for a contract extension and is already holding out. That got broken. The news on that got broken yesterday. We'll see where that goes. So you got a lot of. I don't really worry about it, but it is a lot of noise. It's just loud. You know what I mean? It's like it is what it is, but it's a very just loud topic. Loud like the Cowboys fans. Don't at me. I said what I said.
I mean, if we talk about what can and can't happen by the end of this thing, I don't know. Jerry does whatever Jerry wants to do. I'll be honest, I'm surprised McCarthy stayed or was given a second opportunity through
there you go.
this season, especially given the fact that, you know, Jerry, he reads the headline, he sees Belichick out in New England, Saban out in Bama. You don't think he's making some calls? You don't think he tried to do some of those things?
Well, no, those numbers are all on his cell phone.
Right.
So he just had his assistant go get the cell phone and then get the contacts and then
I think that
dial it and then hold it up to his head so he can talk into it.
I'm a little bit surprised it didn't already happen, but I think that might be an indication that maybe they weren't quite interested. Maybe it wasn't the right time. I don't know. But 12 months of time definitely can change things. And like we just said, there's so much up in the air with this team. We'll get into the quarterback position, the wide receiver position. Somehow Zeke Elliott made it back onto this roster.
That was the funniest part of the whole offseason to me. People weren't talking about it enough about how funny that was.
It's just an interesting bit, to say the least. And I'm interested to hear Jason's take on this because I like seeing how Jason looks at rosters because, we can go on about Jason's takes and things like that, but Jason has a very unique look at roster taking. It's not like other people in the business, and it sheds insight that honestly is weird because all of a sudden it becomes true, and then
that does happen in a weird way.
Brandon Cooks is a top.
It doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen all the time, but the Brandon Cooks call is the one that does stick out, where it's like, I don't know how the hell you divined that out of the universe, but it did happen.
Nico Collins.
Yeah, Nico Collins is another one. Weirdly, these are just people that play for the Texans. That does seem to be the theme, is Jason calls people on the Texans. I don't know why that is. It's not even the right Texas team. But for the purposes of this, Dak Prescott, last year of his deal, a lot of noise around this topic. Similarly, he's rated similar to Joe Burrow in a lot of ways. So he opens the season as the QB8 in the ECR, which would translate to about 60 overall. Again, the ECR has been broken for the last couple of years because of the year of the quarterback in 2022, when if you didn't have an elite quarterback, you lost because there were so many quarterback injuries. It's polluted the data. So what that's done is it's pulled all the quarterbacks up. Listen, I'm going to keep saying this. If you want a quarterback with a rushing floor and you want to spend up for that, one of the Konami code quarterbacks, I could at least make the argument for why that's a good idea. Taking the Dak Prescotts and Joe Burrows and Justin Herberts of the world that don't really give you that much of a rushing floor in the 5th, 6th round, you're overpaying. You're overpaying. It's just what it is. So you got what you'd rather do, smart money, is wait on this. And this is why I didn't mention the ADP. So this is one of the rare things where the public actually understands this and has not adjusted. So the public ADP 96. He's right next to Joe Burrow, actually, in the ADPs and in the rankings. It's just in the ECR, they're like 60, 61, 59, 60. And in the ADPs, they're like 95, 96. If you want to play around at 95, 96 and go for a Joe Burrow or a Dak to get solid quarterback production with limited rushing, you will get some rushing. I don't mean you won't get any, but you'll get some. You'll get a little bit. But they don't let Dak run the way that he used to after all the injuries. And they're not going to start doing that again. I'm sorry. That's just not going to happen. So you're counting on Dak to win it for you with his arm, and he can. But I don't want to put up like a 5th, 6th round pick for it. 7th, 8th, 9, I'd rather 9, but you're not going to get that far down. 7th, 8th, okay. If that's when you're shopping for quarterback, all right. I still think you could wait until about the 10th round and get some real value, but that's kind of my take on the whole situation. Does anybody want to have anything to say about Dak? You want to pound the table for him? You want to talk about his contract situation? Have at it. I throw the floor open to everyone.
Well, I mean, so last year he finished as the QB3, which, of course, I think was really boosted by the last half of the year. I mean, we kind of saw him catch fire when they realized that they're not going to be able to run it in for a touchdown. They have to keep throwing to win the game. And I'm hoping that'll stick as they realize that they signed Zeke Elliott and they're going to still have to probably throw because I know last year they had Tony Pollard, Rico Dowdle, and Deuce Vaughn as their backfield. Now Zeke, Rico Dowdle, and Deuce Vaughn. I mean, I don't really see the difference, and Zeke's just getting older. He did fine, but I still just, if he continues to actually throw touchdowns, QB8's really a floor for him. I mean, it's hard to see him going. I mean, QB5, QB3, like that's more realistic. It's just they're going to have to throw. I mean, it's what this team is made to do with CeeDee Lamb. The guy continues to get open. Jake Ferguson's there. We kind of saw his emergence slightly last year. I'm more worried about Brandon Cooks. That's not even a thing. Michael Gallup retired. Like,
wasn't even on the team to retire. He retired on a different team, Jason.
Yeah,
wasn't even...
like it's still just all these players that were part of it are. I mean, he has to go to Lamb, and when he does that, Lamb is a high-end wide receiver. Clearly,
yeah, I'll
one
make
of the
the
best.
counter argument to that. This team is bad except for CeeDee Lamb. So if I'm playing against the Cowboys, I would triple cover CeeDee Lamb on every play and make you beat me with your other weapons. And if Dak gets hurt at any point, this team cannot possibly make the playoffs. The only way this team makes the playoffs is if Dak and CeeDee Lamb both put up monster years. That's it. Your whole world is that. If you can't do that, this team is bad. This team is done. Like, they have a decent defense. I'm not going to take away from the defense. Like, Micah Parsons is a freak. Like, you got things like that going on, but that's not enough. You wouldn't be able to score enough points. So they've got to be able to keep Dak healthy. They know that. I'm sorry to all the 5 Trey Lance truthers that are left. Like go nuts. Say something to me on Twitter if you want, but I don't care. Zeke, God, I want to go back to my old analysis from years ago. Man, back in the day, 2017, we were talking about this. Zeke was the this team. Zeke was the straw that stirred the drink. He was the one that allowed the ascension of Dak Prescott. When people were like, "Oh, Dak, I don't even know if he's going to be a thing in the NFL." Like, he didn't have a great rookie year. It's we'll see. And then what I was pounding the table for was it doesn't matter because Zeke is so good. The teams are going to stack the box against him, and Dak is going to have all day to throw, and then he can run a little bit. He'll be fine. And he had his first real career year that year, and now it's funny how life works. We've come full circle. We've come all the way to the other side of that argument in 2024, and now it's all down to Dak. Dak has to do it all with CeeDee Lamb. This team cannot compete without those two players, and it's just so whatever it's going to be, it's got to be coming off them and that's why I was saying in the pre-show meeting, I don't know what there is to discuss on this team. I just covered it. That's the whole show. So tomorrow, we're going to be covering the.
Well, no, I mean, you raise a good point, but also that's a point that happened 3 years ago.
I know. It's not new
that this transfer
it's
power
just
and
funnier now that Zeke is back. That he left because of the transfer of power and then came back. It's just way funnier that way. That's all. But yeah, you're correct. That was 3 years ago. That was 2020 when that happened.
And I'm so and I like what Jason raises a good point. You had them absolutely throw the ball all over the damn yard. They threw it everywhere. And you know what? I like that. Throw it everywhere. They built their defense to support that in a way.
Yeah.
You want to throw with us? You guys want to throw with us? Good luck. Good luck. Diggs and Bland are going to take you to the house. We're going to have Parsons absolutely eat your lunch. You better hope we don't put him over the center.
That man's scary.
He'll stack you up every single down.
That man is legitimately scary. Legitimately scary individual. No, I wouldn't want to deal with Micah Parsons on like that just looks it just looks tiring. Like you see Micah Parsons and he just doesn't he reminds me of like the defensive equivalent of Derrick Henry, where it's like by the end of the game, he's not tired. Everyone else looks exhausted. And he's just like, nah, he runs at the same speed.
Yeah, he's a physical freak, and he one-hand tosses, some of the most elite, tackles that are out there, as we've seen.
Diggs is gonna be back.
Diggs is gonna be back. Yeah. Bland proved that he did the same damn thing in that role. They just jump everything. You have both of them out there, and it's gonna be a nice time. Eric Kendricks got added to the roster. I know Eric Kendricks is a little bit far removed from his, really, really productive days in the middle of that Vikings defense, I think. But he's a veteran in that system, and he can help keep them afloat. And I think if they're going to throw, and the smartest thing for them would to not be late on this. Start this early, throw on everybody, rinse and repeat. And that's how you're going to have to live, and that's how you're going to have to die. And it's going to be a really fun season. Or maybe it's going to be a long season.
Or it's going to be a horrible nightmare.
It's going to be one or the other.
Yeah,
but
that's why I'm saying I don't disagree with your point, Jason, that there is significant upside on Dak. My point is there's also significant downside. Because that's where I think people are hedging. That's why he ends up in the Joe Burrow category. Because if you're telling me that, let's take those two data points and compare them. I feel a lot safer with Joe Burrow because I feel like I know what I'm getting. There's less upside, but I don't think the propensity for just total death is as great because Zach Moss can do it. We've seen recently. The Zeke thing is interesting. It's an interesting choice. So I just feel a little safer with that. Whereas the Dak thing, I know he was QB3 last year. I'm glad you brought it up. That's why I intentionally didn't say anything. Because it's I know he was, because they threw it all over the yard. But it's I find it hard to convince myself and to recommend to other people that you should hitch your wagon to that star, quite literally in this case, and do that and feel good about it while fully acknowledging the upside is there. We always talk to people about guys that could get into the top 5 at quarterback. Dak is in a position to be one of those rare guys with almost no rushing floor that could get into the top 5. Well, he could do it.
And, this is one of those situations, too, where, I wrote it down here, but I'm getting a little far ahead of myself, but it kind of, dives into the Dak thing as well, is sometimes your strategy at quarterback is dictated entirely on where you went early on. If I'm this guy that's going to see, because the conversation makes more sense when you're like, hey, are you the guy that's going to hitch your wagon to CD Lamb? If you were that guy that hitched your wagon to CD Lamb
You have the 2
as
pick.
your first pick,
You effectively have the 2 pick at that point. That's what you're
right.
saying.
So you're effectively going to, hey, it's not out of the realm of possibility that, hey, maybe you are the person that overpays a little bit or banks on that little bit of volatility or that uncertainty that they might not have that great of a season or whatever. And you can play on the upside potentially. But that's kind of where you have to approach that situation is like, hey, am I hitching because it makes more sense if you're like, if you talk about, hey, I mean, are you going to hitch your wagon to Joe Burrow, the guy we talked about on the Bengals episode, or are you going to hitch your guy to Dak Prescott, the guy we're talking about in this episode? You can essentially just kind of compare, well, which receiver are you getting? Did you go and get Jamar Chase or did you go and get CD Lamb? Well, that might be the guy that you want to target later because this
that is a good way to think about it.
Essentially be huge.
That is
the
a good way to
stack
think
could be
about
gigantic. And I think that we are in the age of the stack.
Yeah.
The stack has become more proliferated over the last 3-4 seasons. And getting the elite stack can take you to the next level and make you a very, very hard team to beat in your leagues.
Okay. If you're gonna phrase it in those terms, I could warm up to it a little bit. I still stand by my tried and true strategy of wait until round 10, 11 for quarterback anyway.
I do the same
and just
thing.
punt this whole conversation. But that's not how everyone evaluates it. So, all right, well, there you go. There's Dak Prescott for you. It's a big conversation for the offseason about whether or not he's going to get extended or what that's going to look like. Because if he gets out of Dallas, I will say that would be very interesting if they were ever going to let him leave. I'm not convinced that's going to happen, but I know they're saying already that they're prioritizing the CD Lamb and Parsons contracts over Dak. And to be honest with you, that sounds strange to talk about players that are not quarterbacks that are being prioritized over the quarterback contract. So that does tell you kind of where the Cowboys taking the temperature of the room. You know what I mean? Like
they essentially are saying that they value the position that chases the quarterback and that receives the ball from the quarterback more than the quarterback.
They're also telling you they value
that
youth.
Interesting.
They're also telling you they value youth over the quarterback, and that also tells me that this is the last ride for this team. It's either you win a Super Bowl, you got to at least get to the NFC Championship game. If you can't do that, everybody's gone. McCarthy, go. Dak, love you, buddy. Bye. Like it's, we're starting over, and we're gonna pay CD, and we're gonna pay Parsons, and then we're just gonna we're gonna begin again, and we'll let Philly punch itself out, and the other two teams retire fires anyway. So there you go. That's what we'll do. We mentioned it briefly. Trey Lance is the backup here. Good for Trey Lance. Good for you. Not super relevant. We mentioned it a couple times because it's hysterical. Ezekiel Elliott leaves, goes to the Patriots because they were paying him way too much money. Goes to the Patriots, gets bounced out of New England. Had a year. The burst isn't there, right, guys? That's what stood out to me.
The burst was really never there. The issue was kind of that, like, they banked off of his vision for a long time, and Zeke had great vision. But when you don't have the legs to do that anymore to keep up with your vision, it doesn't really matter. So, like, Zeke's game, I mean, while Zeke was never slow, like, his burst and his breakaway speed, I felt like wasn't his, like, calling. It was so much like, hey, they run this system, they run this zone that allows him to really read the field, really use one of the he had in spades two of the most important traits that I evaluate in running backs, which is contact balance and vision, which are actually a little bit more difficult to, like, quantify because I can't really ID every single thing of those on a spreadsheet.
I'll put it to you another way. He looks like a plotter at this point.
Exactly. And that's kind of the issue is with that type of back, once they start to age and the legs give out, especially when you have a back like we talk about this all the time. What is the shelf life of backs and what is it? It's not years, it's carries.
Yeah.
It's carries. And
it's number of car crashes that you have
made. And it's the only body or the only back that seemingly has nowhere is Derrick Henry. All the other backs from that era have fallen apart at the seams, and it's just because the human body cannot take that type of wheel and deal.
Unless
300
you're
plus
Derrick Henry.
carries,
Yeah.
300 plus carries. Like we watched Marshawn Lynch do it for years, and every single year it was like 280 carries, 290 carries, 300 carries, or even more touches. You're like, this is so much workload for one player. You have to realize, like, we talk about wide receivers, and they're like, oh, he had 100 catches in a season. That's a third of what some of these really high-end backs go through in a workload for a season, and they're not taking quite the hits. So,
You remember
I mean,
Bilal Powell?
yes.
Yeah, no one. Sorry, viewers, talk amongst yourselves. Do you remember Bilal Powell?
Yes.
Bilal Powell is what Zeke is turning into. Just slow as hell, and it's like he can hit the hole, but that's it. And I like your point about contact balance. He does do that very well, but yeah, he's going so slowly now
It's
that
tough.
he's not hitting the hole with the force that he used to, and it's just like it's not great. So because of that, people are aware of this idea. He's opening at the RB 35. 115 overall is what that would translate to as a ranking. And the public is like, nah, bro. They've got him at his ADP is 124. And I'm like, you know what, public? I've accused you for years of being drunk at the wheel. And this year you're making a lot of sense. You're fading some of these quarterbacks that people want you to buy into. You're fading Zeke. I love it. It's not well, we got some stuff for later shows where I'm like, okay, we're back on the scotch. Where it's just like this, but for right now, it's looking good. I like it because yeah, I'm not opposed to taking a punt on Zeke at around 124. It's not much of an investment. You know what I mean? That's like late 10th, early 11th round. Sure, I'll take a flyer on it. I know I'll get something, and if it fails, I can cut him, and I don't feel too bad about it. There's a little bit of upside left on that because he's familiar with the system and they can get him some space like you're talking about, Mason, and he can see the field really well. It's just a question of being fast enough to actually get there to where you're trying to get to. So is anybody going to make the argument for Ezekiel Elliott, or do we all kind of feel similarly about this?
No, and I mean, they don't, like, they're better at the guard positions, which is kind of weird. They're not stellar at tackle anymore, which is a little bit strange. Terrence Steele's been odd. I don't know what to make of their depth at tackle. It's a little bit weird. Center is a question for them. They have a lot of questions along the offensive line that going back here is like they want to throw, guys. They want to throw. They want to throw.
Yeah, and at the same point, I mean, you're really hoping if you get Zeke that he scores touchdowns. That's what you're buying into right now.
I think that's why he's there.
That's the whole reason.
They knew they couldn't punch the ball in last year from close range, and I literally think that's Zeke's job. Remember the weird LeGarrette Blunt year?
Jamal Williams.
That's literally what I think they're going to attempt. It with Zeke is like, we're going to do the LeGarrette Blunt. We're on the 2. Give it to him 4 times. See if he can bang it in. But they might not actually give it to him 4 times is the problem. Because if they did, CeeDee Lamb would be standing there on the sideline with his hands on his hips. Like, what are you doing? So it's like, I don't know if that's ever going to come to fruition, but I literally think that's the best case scenario for Zeke.
This is also one of those teams that is interesting, though, because they almost are the team that wants to stay away from the goal line and stay within the 15-yard range because they
take shots from the 10.
It gives them more room to maneuver, and they're like, well, we get down here, and I'm like, my playbook gets this big. And,
right. It turns into Zeke.
Some of these plays have Zeke's name on them, and I'm very worried about that.
And the defense is like, great, stack it. Yeah. Don't like we're not going to let him anywhere near it. So it's scary. And then the other problem is the backup is Rico Dowdle, who I'm sorry, I have yet to see any reason to be optimistic about Rico Dowdle. I'm just every time I watch Rico Dowdle tape or watch him play, I just come away being like, why? Well, I'm just kind of deeply unimpressed by the whole thing. And it's like, and what's funny is people seem to be agreeing with some of that because he opens as the RB 47, which would translate to 151 overall. And the public must feel bad because they've got him at 140 by virtue of an ADP. And it's like, that's not filling me with confidence. You know what I mean? Weirdly, he's the Zeke handcuff, but why do I care?
I
Like-
care because I think he's actually becomes the pass catching back.
So
That's
they're
why
not
I
going to throw it to Deuce Vaughn.
Correct.
Who has
That's
no
why I
ADP
think he's
and
going
is
to go
not
to
on this sheet.
Dowdle. Like that's kind of why.
Have you seen any evidence that Rico Dowdle can actually catch a football?
Yes, last year he was 17 for 22 for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns.
22 targets is a small sample, but okay, at least he only
But-
had 5 that incompletions.
Yeah, the whole reason that was also like I'm pretty sure that was his first year,
I don't remember.
maybe second.
Mason,
It
Rico
is-
Dowdle thoughts?
Okay, if you guys, I'll be honest with you. I don't know who the hell Rico Dowdle is.
There you go. That's the
I
correct
had to
answer.
look this
That's the
into.
correct
you
answer.
You guys want to know what I've learned about Rico Dowdle? Rico Dowdle, undrafted in 2022, didn't play for 2 seasons, came back very middling the last 3 years. I've got
He's not good.
19 receptions last season. He has 19 career receptions. They all came last season. I mean, but to be fair, he had next to no snaps any season. He had 14 snaps for the Cowboys in 2020. 2022, he had 7. Last year, looks like he finally played a role.
Yeah, last year was his first time actually being a backup.
He did go ahead and bust up the Cardinals. It looked like a lot of his
Cardinals were the worst team in football last year.
He had,
so.
yeah, I know. He had his 3 of his 19 receptions came against that game. One of his touchdowns there, a pair of drops, 7 forced missed tackles. So I mean, like, is Jason wrong? No, that's going to be who's their pass catching back. Probably, most likely. The interesting thing that what brought me into looking into more of his stats was to see, which is actually a much more interesting aspect of this, which isn't going to really matter for 75% of fantasy players. But if you happen to be in one of those weird leagues that gives you some kick return yardage, and I know that those are going to become a little bit more in vogue given the new ruling.
We've talked about
Love
this
it.
so
I keep
much
loving
over
it.
the last several shows. I don't know how this keeps happening.
Well,
Mason,
it's
we were
gonna
talking
be-
about Rashid Shaheed at one point, and it just this all just started spiraling. Like,
So this brings up a funny point is that I'm sitting working with PFF for the draft and we're doing draft trackers, and there's a number of players that we have some data on that I'm like, usually guys that have 40 offensive snaps in their last season in college don't get drafted in the 6th round. What's happening here? You go and look more into it. Well, teams were drafting return specialists way more than they ever do, and it's because it's going to be a huge part of the game this year. I know that like the alert comes across people's news stuff, but no, literally teams are very into right now trying to min max. Special teams coordinators are frothing at the bit to pull out some fancy stuff. And so if you do maybe happen to play in one of those really weird leagues, go for it. Take the
I've played in
shot.
leagues like that before. It's actually kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you more options too, because sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm really up Shit's Creek and I have no paddle, and I might as well play
The
this guy
bye
that might
weeks is
take
killing
one
me.
back.
I
Yeah,
got
exactly.
nothing. you could get lucky.
So while you will never draft this guy, while I would suggest not ever drafting Rico Dowdle,
he is being drafted. That's why he's on the page. That's the whole point.
I would say don't.
Yeah, me
but
too.
You could keep an eye on him on your waivers, because if you really do have that type of system, like, hey, he could maybe catch a couple balls, but his role is going to be so limited, you guys. It's not a sizable sample to really put any
other things that are being drafted around Rico Dowdle. Here, you want the list? Josh Downs, Rashid Shaheed, Antonio Gibson, Romeo Dobbs, Chuba Hubbard, Will Levis, Jerry Jeudy, Jahan Dotson, Jaleel McLaughlin, Khalil Shakir, Adam Thielen. I will take any of those things, any of them, over Rico Dowdle. anything I just listed, except for maybe Will Levis. But even then, possibly Will Levis. But what? You gonna argue with that? You want me to read the list
Well,
again? I can read the
again,
list
I just-
again. You want me to read it again?
Again, so I have him
Don't
actually
argue with me
ranked at
about Rashid
RB
Shaheed. This
35.
will take 2 hours.
So because I'm going with PPR, I have him ranked higher than Zeke by 2 spots because I think Zeke gets a touchdown and Dowdle gets the pass. So
I think they don't throw to the running back historically enough for it to matter. That's kind of my thing. Is that they don't. It's not really a team that throws to the running
Jason's
back.
not wrong though. Like that's the roles they are going to play.
No, he's not
It's just,
wrong about
like,
the
You're
role.
also not wrong that it's like it's tough because I'm also of the thinking that I hope the Cowboys make in vogue that I don't have to run the football to be efficient on offense, and that's kind of my own selfish reasoning because I want to see more of like explosive football. I think that that's the evolution, the way football should go. If you can't run the ball, don't bother. You don't
just
need
move
to.
on. Yeah.
Figure it out another way.
So
There are more than one
Cliff
way.
Kingsbury was a man ahead of his time.
No, because just because you throw the ball doesn't mean that you have to throw it poorly.
I know, but when you
like,
say the things that you're saying, I have to make that joke. I can't
listen,
not make that joke.
You can run the air raid. You just have to run the air raid and not whatever they were doing before.
Not whatever nonsense that was. All right. And no one cares about Deuce Vaughn, right? Good. Wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, good at football. CeeDee Lamb, rated as wide receiver 1, number 2 overall. His ADP is 2. I have nothing to say about this. He is technically holding out. I do not care. He will be there. He is not going to hold out and void a year of his contract and delay getting paid because that's how the CBA works. So he'll take his fine for not coming to training camp. I don't care that he's not at training camp. He'll be there day 1 when it actually matters. He might have a little bit of rust. Don't care. He's young enough that I just don't care. Mason, I know you have some CeeDee Lamb notes, so I'll turn it over to you.
CeeDee Lamb's good at football. You guys, like, I don't. There's not a whole lot. Literally, my notes are like, he was very good. One of the highest graded receivers from the slot last season. And it's due to his massive big playability from the slot specifically. He had 10 more explosive catches than any other receiver from the slot last year. What else is to say? It just goes into kind of we've been leading up to this point, but investing in CeeDee Lamb can take you far, and potentially adding that stack of Dak Prescott could give you that oomph to, if they do what they could potentially do, if they go on that, if they pick up that momentum that they ended the last season with, at least offensively to some regard, they could be a very scary unit. And that's kind of the people that you want to build off of. And I think that leads into the question that we really have is Brandon Cooks. And I'll let Jason jump into what he thinks about the wide receiver room. But I think that something like that can add value to a guy like Brandon Cooks. Because when you get these offenses that are just throwing the ball all over, and yeah, CeeDee Lamb's going to possibly put up humongous numbers, it's trickle down. Like the yards go. Like it's like those old school teams where you're like, I just want anybody on this team, So
Jason, Brandon Cooks is the wide receiver 2, opens at wide receiver 55, should translate to around 134 overall. However, the public clearly understands what Mason is talking about because Brandon Cooks' ADP is already up to 111. So it's a full 20 spots ahead of the expert consensus, and it's July 25th. So go ahead, take us through the Brandon Cooks. You're the resident Brandon Cooks believer, and occasionally.
Well, I mean, it's just the fact that you look at how targets are being distributed. You've lost Tony Pollard, like I said, we've touched on. Running backs don't really get targeted a whole lot, but that's theoretically 67 targets that are now available. Granted, I give a majority of those to Dowdle, which also helps boost him. But when you're looking at it, Lamb last year targeted 181 times. Like, not a crazy number, but you also have Jake Ferguson, 101 targets. Then you have Brandon Cooks, who's sitting around 80, targeted 81 times last year, had 54 receptions, 657 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That's, I mean, if you're the third option on an offense that we keep touching on is passing a lot, like you don't really need to worry about the run game. That's just such a good value. And Cooks clearly, I mean, they thought they were going to be able to do it with Gallup, and Cooks is the one who really stepped up and was able to fulfill that role of kind of being the one opposite of Lamb to do something, and he did. I mean, Ferguson also had that boost, but he was, again, more of the big body guy, kind of push people around, and also struggled catching the ball, but which was extremely frustrating. So, and Cooks doesn't really do that. I mean, he's more consistent. So you have that veteran presence with Lamb, who's a clear star, and you can just kind of trust him to come back to the quarterback and be one of my favorite things about a veteran player. You know, if the quarterback ends up struggling at all, he's going to be the one who's more likely ends up being open or pulling off coverage from Lamb to allow him to be open. Like, it's just how that's going to end up working out, whether it's a big block or him getting some kind of notice. The opportunity is just too easily there, especially, I mean, ADP's brought him up pretty high, but if he's seeing over 90 targets, I mean, that from especially Dak Prescott, kind of somebody you want to hitch your wagon to. I mean, it's a good flex option for you more often than not. And I mean, we've already seen the other guys lower than him who aren't even being drafted, and have no real value. So it's more difficult for me to see it going anywhere else or the targets being distributed in any other way.
No, he'll be the third target getter on the team. Lamb, and then it's a split between Ferguson and Cooks. That'll 2-3, 3-2, something like that. And then that's the nice thing is that with this team is that it all goes into neat little buckets because nothing else matters. Because there's no other name on the page. You know how most teams we go through 3 wide receivers? We're not doing that here. We're done. Brandon Cooks, lock it in. There you go. It is tempting to think of Brandon Cooks, by the way, as like somebody who's like 100. He's not 100. He's not like 32. He's just bounced around the league in such a manner that it's very easy to fall into that trap where it's like, I looked that up the other day where I was like, how old is Brandon Cooks? He's got to be about ready to retire soon. No,
He's 30.
No, he's 30. Like he's fine. He's got like 2-3 more years in the league. Like, it's good. So I just, it is tempting though to be like, he's got to be done, right?
I mean, he could pull the Bobby Forrest and just start taking himself down and save himself the hits, and he could play for another 5 years.
It's wild. So, but I'm with you. Brandon Cooks is something that I'm interested in for this year, just because lack of other options on the team and a team we know that's going to have to throw to be successful. And then the final thing you mentioned, it's Jake Ferguson, kind of a breakout tight end from last year. It's one of the rare situations where we are going to have to actually talk about a tight end for a second. He opens the season as the tight end 9, 92 overall. His ADP is about 85. I actually don't really have an issue with that. We know Dak Prescott. We've seen it time and time again. Dak Prescott will throw to a tight end. He will, even if they're not good, he will make a tight end fantasy relevant. Blake Jarwin. We could go back. Jason Witten, way past his prime, running down the field on his bloody stumps because his feet had fallen off. It's literally like he will find a tight end to throw the ball to. It is a thing he does. And Jake Ferguson just happens to be actually decent. So he was a little raw last year. A few too many drops. I think they're going to clean that up. I actually am fine if you want to take Jake Ferguson in that range. If you're looking at a mid-level tight end, I typically prefer to wait on tight end. I miss the days of Jake Ferguson and Trey McBride as a value that you could get on the waiver wire. That's the other thing is that who knows what the new crop of that will be.
But
yeah, there's going to be, I don't know about that, but there's still some meat on that bone if you want to take Ferguson in the mid 80s. It's not really my thing. I'd prefer to wait and try and get a value, but if we were talking about stacks, and you don't get CeeDee Lamb, but you do get Dak, and you're that way. You want that. The Dak Jake Ferguson stack actually isn't that bad. You know what I mean? Like he's gonna throw to Ferguson a lot, and he's gonna target him in the red zone.
This is so. I love where you're going with this, and I just want to put this into a little bit of perspective. Trey McBride.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Trey McBride.
Oh yeah.
Tight end 3 right now.
God, I remember when that was on the waiver wire and it was free. Not free anymore.
Oh, we lost him.
Mason was making a point, and then his internet died.
Got hit with crowd. No,
I got taken out by the truthers.
The crowd strike got him. The crowd strike got him.
So the Trey McBride thing, that reference is going to be so dated too by the time we get all the way into these coming out.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We're leaving it in.
No, but if you go and look at just like some of the key statistics and just some of the more I don't want to sound snooty and just say advanced statistics, but just some more of the not traditional box score statistics. You have a lot of very similar looks. Trey McBride had 4 drops, yet we talk about Jake Ferguson's drop problem. He had 5. You know, they have a lot of similar statistics when we look up here. You got 761 yards. You've got 825. They are not that far off from each other. No. They finished 6 yards after catch, yet you can get Jake Ferguson or for tight end 9.
I was gonna say it's like 4 full rounds cheaper.
Do you guys remember the scene from The League? And they go to the strip club, right? But it's not because they're going to the strip club. They go to the strip club because the stripper is really smart. And she tells them to take Rick. She's like, why take so-and-so in the 4th round when you can have Ricky Williams in the 9th? Yeah. This is that moment. This is your moment for that. Don't overpay for Trey McBride when you can have Jake Ferguson many rounds later.
Yeah. That's exactly the point. Is Ferguson there's so many comparables between those two players, and it gets overshadowed because of what McBride was able to do. He was more flashy about it. When you actually
put it less. They have less, so I get it.
Yeah.
So I get like why people are like, yeah, but he's the only thing there.
When you put it on paper and you look at it, you kind of realize like, oh, this is not that dissimilar.
Yeah.
And I could save a lot of energy and capital by just waiting. And that's usually a good idea. And we know that Dak is gonna feature a tight end. It's gonna be Ferguson. It seems like, and this just makes a lot of sense if you're gonna go that way. So, final thoughts on the Cowboys, gentlemen. Anything we didn't cover?
EPA or bust. They're either gonna score a lot or they're not gonna score a bunch. Yep. So one or the other.
And if CeeDee Lamb gets hurt, season over. Season canceled.
You will be seeing Trey Lance.
Yeah, canceled. Season canceled. Refund all the season ticket holders' money. It's over. We're forfeiting all the games. Yeah, CeeDee Lamb has the opportunity to use an internet meme. CeeDee Lamb has the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever and actually hold out. It would be it will never happen, but it would be the funniest thing. I would respect him so much if he actually just held out and called their bluff and didn't take the contract accrual. Like, literally was like, no, that's fine. We just won't have a year of contract accrual, and I'll play on my rookie deal for 1 more year just to watch you burn, just to watch you fail, and just like the most spiteful thing humanly possible. But he will never do it because it would literally be the end of his career. No other team would touch him at that point. Maybe the Raiders. Maybe the Raiders would be willing to be that crazy. It'd be like the ultimate game of chicken. It would be incredible. It's the opportunity to do the funniest thing of all time. Never gonna happen, but a man can dream. That's my final note. I'd love to see it. It'd be great. All right. Well, with that, tomorrow we will be talking about the Detroit Lions. So that will be super fun. So we will see you tomorrow. But until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!